First of all, the way things are going in Irish Water, are there any plans? Have you any good news for us today?
Well, we had a number of meetings today in government in relation to Irish Water. They will continue. We're making a lot of progress. We're not going to rush things in the sense that we want to make sure we do everything correctly and get everything right. I think it's critically important from a government point of view to address all the concerns that all the citizens have in relation to Irish Water. The time for mistakes are gone. It's time to make sure we correct everything, and we are ensuring that we're doing that. However long that will take is, that's going to be dealt with. I'd rather get things right and do things properly and ensure all concerns are addressed, than put a time frame on it. It could be towards the end of next week, or it may drift into the following week. But we're certainly going to make sure we get everything right.
What about people who don't pay their bills? Will their water be cut off? Will it be reduced to a trickle?
Well, I really want to address this issue. I feel the day of going out and saying that people's water is going to be cut off or reduced to a trickle is over. And I'd like to say that to people across the country. I don't think it's realistic to be going around saying that. We want people to comply. Obviously, we want people to engage with Irish Water and want them to become customers of Irish Water.
So if they don't pay their bill, their water will remain running?
Well, what we want to do is create a process whereby people will pay their bills. Their bills will be modest. The government aims to ensure that the charges are modest and are going to be determined for a number of years so we can have certainty and clarity. But being realistic, I don't think it's appropriate to be using the language of going out and saying you're going to potentially cut off people or reduce their pressure of their water. I probably don't think it was helpful day one. Maybe it wasn't the approach that should have been taken. In fact, I would say it wasn't the approach that should have been taken.
So is it fair to say that their water will not be cut off?
Well, it's never the ambition to cut off anyone's water. I would say that up straight. And the government are looking at other mechanisms to try and bring people with us. It's important now that we bring people with us in relation to the creation of this utility. Irish Water and the creation of Irish Water is the right thing to do in order to have the capital investment so we have an adequate water supply in the country in future generations. If we do not take these actions, we simply won't have that. But I think going around and telling people that you potentially are going to cut off their water or reduce it, I don't think it was necessarily the right way to go.
So, look, yes or no, will the water be cut off?
Well, the message is quite clear. I don't advocate or don't ever want to see anyone going out to cut off anyone's water. Can I be any clearer than that?
In that context, though, will there be any sanction for people who decide not to pay their water bills? And we know there are many out there who don't want to do it. If it's not going to be revenue, it's not going to be reducing it to a trickle, how are you going to deal with those who don't pay?
Well, those issues are being dealt with by the government at the moment. We've had a lot of discussions in relation to that. Yes, and of course we're going to have to look at mechanisms there. I mean, I believe the most important thing is to bring people with us and to try and ensure that people will comply with fairly modest charges in relation to Irish Water. I think that's the most critical thing, that we have modest charges and that people see the value of what we're doing and as a consequence come with us. That's the primary. Now, if there are people out there as a result that still feel aggrieved, then we have to engage in a process with them. And that needs to be done too. We have to address their concerns.
Will we see people go to court?
But finally, if there are people then who simply will just full stop say that they're never ever going to pay, obviously from a government point of view, we're going to have to look at mechanisms by which we can deal with that.
Will the regulator, will the regulator, for example, be setting a new rate of water, or will there be further tax credits?
Well, all of that has been dealt with. I'm not going to breach cabinet confidentiality in relation to that, but certainly we've been quite publicly saying that the issue of charges are going to be reassessed, and that is going to happen. And we'll be engaging with the regulator forthwith.
What's your reaction, Minister, to what Senator John Whelan had to say last night, that they were sold a pup, in actual fact, that the government was sold a pup?
I heard about those comments. I know John is, he's very determined in his views, and he's very passionate about his views. I think there were a lot of mistakes. I think the way in which, I suppose, the setup of Irish Water was considered could have been done in a different way, and I think that's that's the expression he was given. He was making last night. That's what he was saying. I wouldn't necessarily go down the line of saying that anyone was misled, because I wouldn't think that's appropriate, but I certainly think mistakes were made and they could have been done in a different way.
John Tierney, could I ask you just a question in relation to the centre here today? These people who are fielding calls, they're doing a job. It's a difficult job because, look, I mean, today they didn't want to be identified. Why is it that they're taking so much flack?
Well, look, we're on the starting of a campaign to create a customer database for the water system. They have handled 275,000 calls here. Actually, in total, we have dealt with 475,000 calls through the contact centre between operations, metering and the customer application campaign. They've also taken in 588,000 postal items, which is an enormous figure. So between all of that, they have been hugely busy. We had a very difficult time at the beginning of the month, or beginning of October, which we acknowledge because of the volume of calls, the volume of post and so on. That has been attended to. Additional resources have been applied. The call answering times here now are excellent. And I want to compliment everybody here associated with that.
But the staff here, they're taking a lot of flack. You know, there's a lot of angry customers. Will we ever have a day where the customer is satisfied?
Well, look, I mean, this is at the very beginning of the system, and obviously people will be expressing their views, and the volume of calls is such that a huge contact has been made by the customer, which is good in itself. And if people have views to express, they have to be listened to. But over time, the work that will be done here, the value of the work through the operations to the customer service will be very well appreciated by the people, because that's going to continue long into the future. And if you look at the experience of all of the utilities across the world, difficult beginnings have been brought to excellent fruition in terms of the manner in which the work is done over time.
Is the Minister making your job a little bit more difficult if you're going to restrict the ways and you can tackle people who don't pay? Ultimately, when you start metering, if you can't sanction people by turning off the water, that makes your job harder.
The Minister has been, I think, very clear in what he has said about the system that's going to be implemented. If you look at all of the different, the property tax, the household charge, all of the different charges that were introduced in recent years, the vast majority of Irish people paid those charges. Indeed, in the property tax, it's over 90%.
Do you still believe that the vast majority will pay the Irish water charge?
I absolutely do. And when the government decisions are made in the next couple of weeks, the clarity that will be provided in that, together with the clarity, as the Minister said, in relation to the mechanisms for the follow-up of payment, when people see the fairness and so on, the vast majority of people will pay.
Can I ask you, with regard to the new figure that will be brought about, as Chief Executive Officer, will you be making particular suggestions and recommendations to Government and to Minister Kelly here as to what should be the figure? Because you saw the amount of opposition to the charges that were being bandied about up to last week, and even now people are very dissatisfied. Have you any particular figures in mind?
I think you'll have to appreciate that these are decisions that have been undertaken by the government.
Sure.
And
you're the Chief Executive, and you'll know what it takes to run the business.
We have to wait the outcome. The Minister himself has clarified in relation to the necessity to ensure that the charge is sufficient to enable